Welcome to the FMCG Guys podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Torres, accompanied by another host, Efrain Rosario. Hey, Efrain.
Hey, Daniel. Good to be with you as always.
Likewise. So one of the big topics that's hit FMCG players' agenda, especially in Europe this year, has been retail media, and we've talked about it with some of our guests this year. Why do you think that this space seems to be growing and growing?
Well, I think it's in essence a couple of things. One is that I think the opportunity that it opens up with regards to being able to reach consumers and shoppers with more relevant content, particularly at the moment of choice, if you will. But I also think it opens up opportunities with regards to customer collaboration as well. So how you work with retail partners as a brand, I think is changed for the better when you think about it through the lens of retail media.
Yeah, exactly. And we've been lucky to have already e-commerce directors from the brand side and some retailers talking about retail media on the show this year, which has been really cool. And today we're actually lucky enough to be accompanied by Nick Ashley, who's the MD Tesco at dunnhumby. And with him, we want to explore how the UK's largest grocer is approaching this space to help brands offer a 360 experience to consumers.
Nick, great to have you on the pod. For those of us who've worked in the industry for quite a while, we're very familiar with dunnhumby and what you all do. But for those less familiar, could you just tell us a little bit about dunnhumby and the work you all do in retail?
Yeah. Sure. So dunnhumby it's owned by Tesco, but it works with a number of retailers across the globe. And the role that it fulfills with Tesco is predominantly three things, really. So one, a series of retail services, so using insights and data predominantly driven from the Clubcard loyalty program to deliver insights into performance and make recommendations moving forward as to how the brand and the business might want to adapt. Second thing is insights, so working with CPGs to understand. So the flagship product that you may have heard of, I'm sure you're very familiar with that, Efrain, is something called the dunnhumby shop, where a CPG can look at the shop and understand performance of their brands and their SKUs in the Tesco channels. And the third area, which I'm closest to, is media. So this growing world of retail media and how dunnhumby can help Tesco work with CPGs to reach their customers in the Tesco environment.
What does it mean exactly to be like the MD of Tesco at dunnhumby exactly?
Well, so recently my role's changed actually. So I'm now running a cross-functional team across Tesco and dunnhumby. Which has been a new change that we've introduced over the last few months or so. And that team consists of salespeople from dunnhumby. It consists of tech people from Tesco. It consists of customer people from Tesco. And it consists of commercial people from Tesco. And this cross-functional team's role is in essence to develop a whole series of different propositions and products that CPGs can then use to reach their customers across the Tesco.
So, Nick, it's interesting that it's kind of, in essence, come full circle for you in a way, right? Where you're now leading this cross-functional team between dunnhumby and Tesco. I think you'd mentioned to me that you started your career, or you've worked previously at Tesco. So could you tell us a little bit about that experience as well?
Yeah, I mean, so prior to Tesco, I'm a media planner by trade. So I spent 20 odd years at WPP, predominantly at Mindshare, who I know you've had people from Mindshare on the pod in the past, working with a range of clients, predominantly in a media planning capacity. So I did that for 20 odd years. And then in 2017, I moved to Tesco as head of media. I had two roles there really. So first was Tesco's own marketing and media investment. So responsible for investing that budget, working really closely with Mediacom, who are our agency, and ensuring that it was deployed in the most effective way. And then secondly, working with dunnhumby, when dunnhumby were selling media to CPGs. So sort of a double role. And that was 5 years. It was brilliant. I started Tesco just at the beginning of the turnaround, of the brand turnaround, which is obviously very familiar. Many people know about that. And so it was great to be part of that. It was a brilliant business and culture to be part of, to really improve the brand, the way that the brand spoke to customers over the last 5 or 6 years or so, and really living and breathing every little helps, which is absolutely what Tesco's customer first mantra is that everyone knows. But then the opportunity came to dunnhumby, which is owned by Tesco, so it didn't really feel like I was moving in entirety, to be honest. But the opportunity came predominantly to think about this growing, emerging, explosive media of retail media, and to work with CPGs to think about how we could solve their business problems across the Tesco Media and Insight platform. So that's why I moved. I think it is the most fascinating part of media to be in at the moment. And you cannot open a website in the trade without hearing a point of view about retail media. So I think it's a brilliant space to be in, really exciting, seeing huge amounts of growth and huge amounts of innovation in the particular space. So it's a great space to be in.
Yeah. And I think you're spot on with that, Nick. Like you said, I think you could throw a rock and you'd hit some sort of article around retail media because everybody's got a point of view on it. And it is it's a great time to be looking at it, given particularly here in Europe where it's really starting to take off. I'm curious, given, like you said, you've kind of come again full circle in regards to having started your career in media, having worked at a retailer with Tesco, and now looking at media again, but looking at it through that retail lens. Particularly given the fact that you're now at dunnhumby, can you, just for our audience, give us a little bit of a explanation in regards to how we can think about retail media in relation to loyalty card data, which has been, dunnhumby's forte for quite a while?
100%. I think that is absolutely at the nub and the heart of what modern retail media is all about. So let me give you a few stats about Clubcard. So 21 million households have Clubcard, which is a fairly large chunk of the UK. 11 million Clubcard holders access it through the app. So it's increasingly digital. That figure was only 1 million about 18 months ago. So you're seeing the pace of change. And then Tesco introduced something called Clubcard Prices back in September 2020, which is member pricing in essence, so the best pricing. And ever since that's been introduced, usage of Clubcard has gone through the roof. So in large stores, for example, 85% of transactions take place with a Clubcard. And the reason I'm telling you that is because obviously this means that the data that dunnhumby has and Tesco has at its disposal is huge. So that's the starting point. That is the most important starting point when we think about how we interact with CPGs. So let's say that you wanted to understand more about a prospective audience. That's absolutely where we would start with the Clubcard data. So we can slice and dice it in a number of different ways, which I'm really happy to talk through, which then allow a brand to think about how they want to talk to their potential customers and which channels they want to use to reach them.
Did you say that 75% of Tesco shoppers use the card?
85% in large stores.
Wow.
Yeah, so the data's huge. And I suppose the advantage of Tesco versus perhaps some other large retail media operations is frequency. So most grocers, obviously people shop regularly. So the regularity of data, as well as the scale of the data, is a really important point. So I suppose to bring this to life a little bit, some examples of how people might want to use that data. So let's say you're launching a piece of MPD. I suppose one of the most important things that you probably want to understand in the category is who's most likely to switch. So we could use propensity modelling and do use propensity modelling to identify who the most likely switchers could be in a category. Or let's say you're launching a brand whose essence is about sustainability. Then we can use the database to understand customers who are most likely to buy those sort of products. So countless different ways that a brand could use it. And then if I think back to my media planning days, in most media, what happens is you do loads of really interesting planning, audience insight. And then when it comes to actually buying that audience through the media, you buy a really broad demographic audience. So there's a big disconnect.
Yeah.
I think the big advantage of retail media is the audiences that a CPG creates can then be absolutely reached through the range of channels, and that's it brings huge efficiency as a consequence.
Yeah, along these lines, how do you see retail media contributing to building like a truly omni-channel, like sofa to store, being from the sofa on your phone or on TV or whatever, to store proposition?
I think it's a good question. And I think there's a myth that retail media is all about e-commerce and point of purchase. So that's really important. And it will always obviously have a role to play when people are making that final purchase decision. So one example, which I love, is 80% of searches on Tesco.com are generic. They're not for a specific brand. So there is still always the opportunity to influence and to persuade and to be salient at the point of purchase. But what we're increasingly seeing is a range of channels from the sofa to the store, as you say, Daniel. And I think retail media can increasingly offer brands other opportunities. So that could be awareness, it could be consideration. So some examples. So Tesco magazine, print isn't a particularly cool thing to talk about anymore, but Tesco magazine is the most read magazine in the country.
Oh my God.
6.3 million readers, read on average for 28 minutes per session, and obviously gives a sort of long form storytelling environment. We've struck partnerships with broadcasters. So club card data can be matched with Sky's data, with ITV's data, and a brand can reach that audience really effectively on broadcast TV, connected TV. Things like smart screens, so outside stores. As you go into a store, we've got a big partnership with JCDecaux. So you can inspire people at the point of purchase. So there are that's just some examples. There are a whole raft, I think, of different opportunities where this myth that all it is final point of purchase media, I think is no longer the case.
Yeah. So I guess if I had to put it into layman's terms for myself, retail media almost serves as a thread that ties together all these touch points that you mentioned, right? Everything from out of home, TVC, in-store, online, and digital. Retail media can, in essence, kind of serve as that thread that ties all those touch points together in regards to creating an overall cohesive experience.
Exactly. And then with data at the heart, Ephraim, so I think what's really important is that you can message more precisely and more appropriately at a different stage of the journey, depending on what your brand is looking to achieve. So yeah, it's definitely increasingly full funnel, I guess, is another way that we talk about it. So if you're thinking about a brand oriented campaign, retail media can be used to really sharpen your targeting and your insight into that particular activity. So yeah, it connects across the piece.
It's interesting how you talk about, when you talk about, we're asking you about retail media, but I think that you really have like a very omni approach to it. No, I think that normally the conversation on retail media is very focused on the .com, but it looks like you're really seeing, and I think it makes a lot of sense as well, that the more holistic point of view and like the full, you said full funnel, right?
Yeah, I think there's a few things happening. I think the first thing to say is that, particularly in grocery, is that most transactions still take place in the store, right? So 85% of transactions take place in the store. So what's happening in store, which I think is really exciting, is we call it the connected store, but it's in essence is a digitization of media opportunities within the store. So that could be big screens, which gives brands the opportunity to be flexible, very much like digital out of home, offer new creative at different times of the day, different days of the week, whatever. So there's that's happening. There's also scan as you shop devices as you go around the store that you could serve messages on, and we are serving messages on depending on people's club card profile, but increasingly that might be on the basis of where someone is in the store. So example I like to quote, you've just put some chicken in your basket, is you serve an ad for Old El Paso, or you serve a relevant communication at that particular time. So So it is increasingly omnichannel. So the store is becoming more digital. The .com which is increasingly app, is becoming more performance oriented. So we've launched as many retailers have, a whole range of sponsored products across .com. And then I suppose the third way I talk about it is then these data partnerships. So how do you create this audience and then match an audience and target that audience on other channels such as Sky, Facebook, ITV, etc., which is exactly what we're doing.
So, Nick, I'm going to date myself on this, but, when you were describing being able to, in essence, do very targeted or being able to do merchandising by day part, I remember actually being in Spain years ago, and I was blown away in that there was actually a retailer that we used to work with when I was at a prior FMCG, and they actually had somebody physically go in and change out the merchandising because, like, in the mornings they knew they sold more orange juice, whereas in the afternoons they sold more soft drinks, and obviously brilliant, but not very effective or efficient. Efficient, not effective. It was effective. It wasn't efficient in regards to having to have somebody physically go into the store and swap that out. Obviously, today with what you're describing, that becomes a lot cleaner and efficient to go do. Had a question. So what you're describing in terms of the opportunities that are available to brands and working with Tesco and with dunnhumby, what can you just kind of give us a little bit of a sense in regards to the overall benefit? And you've already touched on some of this to the brand teams in terms of working in this new sort of way.
Yeah. I think the first thing I would always start with as a marketer is return on investment. So whatever the objectives that a brand has, is clearly any media choice has to stand on its own 2 feet for performance. So we talk about the closed loop. So in other words, you can target this audience that I've just described earlier in the pod. You then use whatever the most appropriate channels are to reach that audience. And then most importantly, you can assess whether people have been exposed to that media, and as a consequence, whether they've changed their behavior in some sort of way. And that behavior typically has it driven incremental sales, but increasingly I think it will also has it shifted brand consideration, etc. as well. And this closed loop is where I think retail media is so strong. So again, if I look back to my agency days, yes, there's brilliant models and econometrics and all that sort of stuff in place for other media choices, but there's always a gap. So you never really know whether that TV advertising has been successful. You never really know whether that mix is absolutely the right mix. And this is where I think retail media has got a really interesting dynamic, is this closed loop. So that I think is critical for a brand. Is the first thing is to assess your return. Then I think the second thing is to work really closely with retailers to understand insights. And insights into your category, insights into performance. So a good example is we've recently worked with L'Oreal, and we've run some propensity modeling with them. So as market leader, they want to drive the category in skincare and hair care. So what we did with them was we worked with them to identify people who aren't currently buying the category, but are showing characteristics which strongly suggest that they would be in both skincare and hair care, and then target those people accordingly with a targeted media campaign. And the results have been astonishing. They've been really astonishing. So it's really shifted what I think can be quite sort of demographic, blunt targeting into much more actionable, propensity-based, future-based media.
I mean, what you're doing is you're kind of in essence bringing that precision from online and digital in store as well, in a way. Yeah.
So precision at scale we talk about, I think a number of people do, in that really precise audience targeting. Most brands still need scale, don't they, in order to perform. But it's a more targeted approach than perhaps a broadcast media solution might be.
Yeah. When you talk to brands, or if you were in the brand, what would you encourage them to do more proactively, to really get the most out of retail media?
Really interesting. So I think a lot of brands are, rightly, as we all are navigating this new world and are thinking about what the right structures are for this moving forward. So I suppose what I would encourage brands not to do is to think that all this is something that should sit in the shopper marketing team or the trade marketing team. So increasingly, we're having conversations with an array of people from a CPG. So you'd have the CMO, you'd have the e-commerce person, you'd have the media person, and you'd have the shopper marketing person. And you'd think about some of, I think, the more advanced CPGs have spoken, Unilever and PepsiCo, probably two good examples, have spoken publicly about how they're reorganizing themselves to try and produce a more integrated view of the world across those what can sometimes be silos, I guess. So I think that's the first thing is to think about it in a integrated and cohesive way, and the role it can fulfill across the total marketing plan, not just your trade marketing dollars.
Yeah. And along these lines, are there any like big mistakes or pitfalls that you see companies doing apart from like approaching it in a siloed way?
I think it's a good question. I think everyone's learning. So I suppose the first thing I'd say is I would really push whichever retailer you're working with to run a test and learn program for you, because everyone is trying new things in this space, and what works for one brand won't work for another. So I think that's absolutely critical, to really demand that you see performance metrics, that you're really clear on your KPIs, and that you see that delivery as a consequence. So that I think would be the first thing. I suppose the biggest mistake, we don't see this that often, I think it's changing, but I think the biggest mistake we do see is where brands do still perceive it as being bottom of the funnel activity only. And I think I would encourage people to be more expansive, I guess, in the way that they think about that, particularly because of all the data that I've talked about with loyalty cards and things like that, which provide great insight.
Yeah, we've actually started to use the hashtag forget the funnel, because we're trying to get people out of that mindset of thinking bottom and top of funnel.
I like that.
For that reason. So it's fascinating to hear you talk about that. Were there any other pitfalls you think that brands should avoid as they're kind of, in essence, maybe dipping their toe into this?
What would I say? Don't do what you did last year. It's changing so fast. It's changing so fast. It's unbelievable. If I look at over the last 6 months, we've probably launched 14 different retail media products of some variety in the market. So, and as have all of our competitors. So what you did last year is probably not going to be fit for purpose anymore. So I think I'd encourage people to have JPPs in place with their retail media partners, to be really clear on what their innovation plan would be. As I said before, to test and learn, and not to do what you've always done, because things are changing fast. And I mean, the best example that I've seen recently is, I mentioned digital screens earlier, which we're starting to roll out. Is the performance. They look brilliant, first and foremost. So the role that it fulfills for brands, as well as the role it fulfills for prompting someone's purchase decision, is huge. But the incremental sales performance that I've seen on test and control stores is amazing. That wasn't available this time last year. So unless you're on top of what's going on, then I think you're missing out. So really encourage brands to be open to what's out there.
So that old mantra of, we've always done things this way here, if it was already toxic, now it becomes even more toxic, no?
Yeah, exactly.
No, but it's interesting how kind of 2 years ago, nobody was speaking out retail media. A year ago, everybody started speaking out retail media, and now everybody's talking out in-store retail media, right? Because kind of like ironically, it was an afterthought, the store per se.
Agreed. So, and like I said before, with so many transactions still in that environment, it's critical. And it gives so much more agility and flexibility and creative opportunities for brands as a consequence, I'd say.
Yeah,
I did love the example, Efrain, of someone going to all lengths to change their merchandising on a day-by-day basis. So that's great.
I said it was right result. Maybe not the most efficient way to go about it, especially in today's day and age.
And Nick, without patting yourself in the back too much, if possible, but in your humble opinion, what do you think Tesco is doing well in the retail media space? I mean, I think that from the things you've explained us, I can come up with a few ideas, but what do you think is really like Tesco's differentiator as a retail media platform, and also maybe how brands are benefiting from that?
I think it's a combination of, if I were to really summarize it, I think it's a combination of scale and affinity. So the Tesco brand is a brand that is resurgent, is so present across communities, etc., in the UK and beyond. So it's that affinity that the brand has with the precision that Clubcard data allows brands to work with us on. So I think it's a combination of the two. And look, we're testing and learning, and some things are working and some things are not working as well. And that's something that we're going to be evolving over the next few years as we evolve this particular proposition. I think we're catching up quickly with the States. I mean, everyone says that the States are 2 months ahead of Europe on retail media, which is probably true if you look at some of the revenue figures the likes of Walmart are delivering. But I think we're catching up fast, and the propositions that are available, not just through Tesco, but through retailers across Europe, are really strong. So I think work in progress, but some good stuff. But from Tesco's perspective, I think it's this combination: scale, affinity, precision, Clubcard, all through this closed loop, which gives people confidence. Which I suppose is another important point, isn't it? We haven't really talked about the broader economy. I guess, if you're a marketeer at the moment, I imagine that it's very important that you demonstrate to your board that your marketing investment is working hard. So I think this is where things like the closed loop and retail media, I think, can fulfill a really important role.
I think that a marketeer, if he doesn't go to his board mentioning retail media and AI today, the board would be very disappointed.
Definitely.
Yeah, my sense is that would probably come up.
I think it probably would.
Yeah.
Actually, a quick one. I wasn't thinking of this one, but it just came to mind. What role do you see AI playing in retail media? I mean, do you see anything happening in this confluence?
It's really interesting, actually. I think the one area where it already is playing a role is in data science. So, I talked before about if you're launching a piece of MPD that you want to know who's switching in your category, then if you've got frequent data coming in, then machine learning, etc., can really help you understand that in the real time, and then target people accordingly. So I think it'll be there predominantly. I was talking the other day actually about one area that I don't think there's enough discussion about in retail media particularly is creative. And if we're really harsh, we can look at ourselves and say some of it can be a little bit functional, and perhaps there's an opportunity to improve that a little bit. So if I think of this premise that that there isn't a better way that you could segment your audience than through this amazing data set, let's think about how AI could potentially serve the most relevant messages to the most relevant customer groups as a consequence. So I think it's always going to be led by that data, but I think we're starting to see developments in that space, definitely.
Yeah. Nick, you are speaking my language. And I have to think that I am not alone. So I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, how can people get in touch with you and your team, people on brand teams who want to learn more about how to pursue these opportunities?
Yeah, well, I mean, email me on nick.ashley@dunnhumby.com, and then I'll absolutely get in touch. We've got a team of 150 people who are client-facing at dunnhumby, who can absolutely have these conversations. We work with a number of CPGs anyway, and that number's growing, but always really happy to have more conversations. with anyone who's interested.
We'll be sure to put that into the episode notes as well, so that people can have that email address ready to go. So, Nick, this has been a great conversation, and just a lot of learnings here, I think, for us as we actually go into a space that obviously is getting a lot of attention, but there's great opportunities, so lots more to learn. Wanted to wrap up with one last question, and this is a question that we ask all our guests, which is we ask them to step into the time machine and to go back to the beginning of their careers, and if they could give themselves at that point in time one piece of advice, given everything they've learned over their career, what would that piece of advice be?
That's a brilliant question. I love this question. I've thought about this all week since you prompted me that I was going to get it. And I think it is, if I would say to myself 30 years ago, this is what you need to be, I would say be more confident in having a divergent point of view. So I think if I look back at this, maybe this is just me. When I started my career, I think I was quite focused on pleasing people, and on saying what I thought should be said, rather than saying what I thought and genuinely believed in certain instances. And as we all know, diversity of thought is really important, and it's really important to progress. So be brave, be strong, have the courage of your convictions, and if you've got a strong point of view about something, particularly if you're very passionate and energetic about it, then say it, and I think it will make a difference. So that would be my advice to people starting off their career, and that's what I wish I'd done a little bit more of when I was a little bit younger.
This was Nick Ashley, MD Tesco at dunnhumby. Ephraim, what are your key takeaways from this conversation?
I think, Nick did not disappoint in regards to hopefully getting a lot of our listeners really excited about the opportunities that are available to them through retail media, specifically through what the Tesco and dunnhumby platform can deliver. So to me, one of my big takeaways is the scale that they're able to offer to brand partners. So 21 million households in the UK alone, 85% of transactions and buyers who are, using the club card to be able to make their purchases. Those are pretty impressive and astounding numbers.
Yeah, definitely. And then what I really liked is how he connects the retail media space, so the internet, with more traditional ways of having a dialogue with the consumers, right? Like, for example, combining retail media, coordinating that with the printed adverts that they have, or the magazine that you have in the store. I thought that was very, very cool, actually.
Well, I think it just demonstrates, what I think we've heard from some of our other guests, but also what I think you and I have discussed as well, which is that, consumers and shoppers these days don't shop exclusively in one channel, right? So we as brand marketers engage with those consumers and those shoppers, whether it be through television commercials, whether it be through out of home, whether it be through in-store media, all those things are in play, right? So being able to connect those things together and doing it in a cohesive, connected sort of way makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. What about the role of creative in retail media? I also mentioned that. I thought that was quite interesting, because sometimes we don't talk about that aspect.
To me, that feels like a big opportunity, right? In terms of if you think about in-store as you would think about other forms of media, and thinking about how you could optimize that in terms of your messaging and your content and your creative, I think it just makes a whole lot of sense, right? So I think it's being able to bring not just rigor around that, but also in terms of coming to the argument with facts, right? With data that somebody like a dunnhumby can bring for you in regards to what works best versus not is really, really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else that you think you will bring to work tomorrow?
To me, I think, the premise of the promise that retail media brings around closed loop and being able to attribute sales to that content that we just talked about is something that I think a lot of us have been talking about for quite some time in FMCG, right? So being able to use that to power precision at scale is really, really exciting. So that's something that I'm definitely taking with me when I go into to work discussions tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I think we mentioned it during the show, but if anyone wants to get in touch with Nick, we've put his profile in the show notes, so feel free to get in touch with him. Thanks for listening in again. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, giving a voice to the retailer again, which is something that we've been quite intentional about this year. And we'll see you in the next episode of the FMCG Guys. Have a great day.